I would like to introduce my favorite, Dr. Ballerstedt. He is an amazing person. He validates me because I don't like to eat fiber and vegetables, and he tells me why. I would like to think that by eating animals, I'm not doing bad for the environment. And this man helps me understand why. And so the paradigm shifting thing that you're going to learn from him, you're not going to learn from any other speaker. So please come back in and listen to him. Peter?
Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. Come on now. Woo! Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Nadir, for having this idea. Thank you for the volunteers, the people that are helping. Thank you for the university and for the area for its support. And thank you for coming. Disclosure, by my understanding, I don't have any conflicts to disclose, but in the interest of full transparency, let you know who's talking to you. I am an advocate for low carbohydrate, high fat, restricted carbohydrate, ketogenic, carnivorous dietary, whatever you want to call it, anywhere on that spectrum that fits. I've had my own personal experience going back now almost 11 years. And I'm an advocate for ruminant animal agriculture, and I get to do both at the same time. How lucky am I? Thank you. I've worked in forage agriculture for most of my adult life in one way or another. I currently work for a forage seed company, but I'm not here in any capacity as a representative of that company. Oh, what just happened? Is that the kill switch? Oh, there we go. Try not to touch that button again. So just to let you know, my perspective is as an agriculturalist. Right? Anybody here involved with agriculture? Here's a hint, y'all are. Did you eat within the last week? Did you raise that food yourself? Excellent. But I will point out that you've got a backup plan in case the local conditions fail, right? It's called the point is we are no longer dependent on the food production in one little region. And that's a good thing, because we were used to be, just a generation or so ago, we would be one hailstorm away from a famine, or one zoonotic disease away from catastrophe. But just to let you know, I'm an agriculturalist. That's the background I'm going to bring to the conversation, and I hope I can bring something to the conversation. Again, about 10 years ago or so, I got interested in this way of eating because I came to the realization, a moment of clarity, that I was then, what would it be, a 51-year-old, balding, obese, pre-diabetic. And today I'm just balding. So it's not a miracle, but it's pretty dang close. And my experience was 180 degrees different from what I had been taught was a healthy diet, right? So my background, my training is in things like the sciences related to healthy soils, and the sciences related to healthy plants. That's agronomy, those two. I also have a degree in ruminant animal nutrition. So what makes healthy animals? And then my experience began to fill in this piece, and then I started showing up at gigs like this, and I've been stalking some of these speakers ever since. So I look at this as grass-based health. I've been talking about this for a while, but note the words, grass-based. Okay, because all ruminant animal agriculture is grass-based, regardless of how those animals are finished. We'll get to that. Okay. If I have a key message for the audience today, it is what is it? The secret of enlightenment is to lighten up. Okay? I want people to dump the guilt. Right? Okay? Please don't listen to the people that advocate for the diet that got you sick in the first place. And if you're not aware, thank you. if you're not aware of the role that the plant-based diet folks played in the very foundation and inception of our dietary guidelines, I'll be happy to tell you about that. If you are restoring, if you're improving your health, you are improving the world. Please put some more value on your personal health. But we're pushing against some people, or people are pushing back, interests, whatever. Andrea showed this last evening. I can't leave anything alone. I think my spirit bird is the balding-headed shit flicker. So, here's the title, Time Magazine. Time Magazine, by the way, did play a part in us getting to where we are today. Scientists labeled fat the enemy. Why they were wrong? Well, I can't help myself. So let me help you with that title and fix it just a little bit. So here it is. We helped some scientists label fat the enemy. Why we were wrong. Okay? You're welcome. Okay. So here's the latest incarnation. Right? Avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth. Okay? If that's true, we don't have much of an impact on Earth, as I'll show you with some data, okay? But this is the kind of nonsense. The story has always been that we can't grow enough food to feed people, animals, so we need to be eating plant-based diets, and it would be better for the environment, and those two get conflated. Okay, so this is just, as the dietary message gets weaker and weaker, expect to see more and more of this. But my point is, while it looks like a really convincing argument at the beginning, if we can test each strand objectively, what we find is each one of those strands fails, factually, objectively. And pretty soon we're not left with much of a rope at all. So I hope I can contribute something to that. But it does get tiresome. It's just this never-ending font, seemingly, of this male bovine fecal matter that keeps coming at us. And as Mr. Brandolini said, Alberto said, the amount of energy necessary to refute male bovine fecal matter is an order of magnitude bigger than to create it. So, what I hope to do today is introduce you to the wonder that are ruminants. I want to introduce you, as has already happened, to the role that they played in humanity's past, why they are essential today, and how they will enable us to achieve a truly sustainable future. So ruminants, what are they? Well, there's about 130 some odd species of these remarkable creatures. They were here on Earth, fully formed about 20 million years ago. So far predating humans' arrival. What a coincidence. About 21 of those species have been domesticated by humans. Humans have domesticated a ruminant in every environment in which they've successfully colonized on the Earth. And the biggest group, the biggest percentage of domesticated animals are the ruminants. Wonder why that is. They're not competitive with humans. I'll show you how that is. They convert plant protein, I'll put quotes around it, and low nutrient density organic materials into food for humans. And they provide services and assist in recycling soil nutrients, other things, and they're just so darn tasty. So if you know much about ruminants, you probably know they have multi-compartmented stomachs. They have 4 stomachs. They chew a cud, the process called rumination. You have basically a prey animal that developed the ability to go out and gather mouthfuls of food, form it into a bolus, swallow it into its reticular rumen, And then later in a safer place, bring that back up, re-chew it, swallow it, bring it back up, re-chew it, swallow it. Meanwhile, you have this host, this teeming multitude of microorganisms in its rumen and reticulum that break down that cellulose, just as Amber said. No vertebrate animal makes cellulase, the enzyme necessary to cleave the bonds between two glucose units. What's starch made up of? Glucose units. They're just hooked together differently. So that difference of the bond structure makes all the difference, because the most abundant carbohydrate in the biosphere is completely unutilizable by human beings. It's only because that we have the ruminants and other microorganisms, the ruminants hosting the microorganisms, that we can utilize that fibrous material as a food source. And then once it's sufficiently broken down, we have it moving from the rumen out into the omasum, where some water and electrolytes are removed. And then if it's of small enough size, then it's passed down into the true acidic stomach, where gastric digestion begins. And at that point, it's remarkably similar to our digestive system. Wow, if that works. Simple stomach animal, there's just a nice simple diagram. So this would be like pigs, chickens, rats, us. And you've got, what's the diet made up of? Oh, carbohydrates, proteins, fats. That should sound familiar by this point. It flows into an acidic environment with some enzymes. It's broken down, then flows into the intestinal system with some more enzymes. And then from that system, we absorb sugars, amino acids, fatty acids. Right? Excellent. Ruminants are a little different. And ruminants, cows, sheep, goats, deer, many other kinds. Look at the difference. Its diet is carbohydrate and protein, and you can put quotes around protein. Okay, it's low quality protein going in. If you put too much more than 5% crude fat into a ruminant's ration, things go wrong. And if too much of that fat is polyunsaturated fatty acid, it's even lower number. So that's interesting. We'll get to that. So this is this big, huge anaerobic fermentation vessel. From that are byproducts of the microbial activity, methane, volatile fatty acids, we'll talk about, and ammonia. Once that material is broken down, and the microorganisms themselves, because they've been growing all these microbes, all of that then flows down into the acidic stomach environment, and from the intestine then, very little sugar remains to be absorbed. And amino acids that are going to be absorbed are going to be the result of microbial protein. And as I said, there's not much fat being absorbed from the small intestine. But the very cool thing that's happened is we've put about a 5% crude fat diet in, and about 70 to 80% of that animal's energy is coming from the volatile fatty acids that were produced through fiber fermentation. Through the fermentation of any carbohydrate. Okay? So maybe the message is, let's let the ruminants turn the carbohydrates into fat for us instead of us. Okay, so there's this nice ecological fit. There are such things as essential macronutrients, right? Thank you. Excellent. In the human diet, there are such things as essential amino acids. There's no such thing as essential amino acid in the ruminant diet. There are such things as essential fatty acids in a ruminant diet. There's no such thing as an essential fatty acid apparently in a ruminant's diet. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate in the human diet. There are two forms that are essential in the ruminant's diet. You must have both structural, that would be fiber, and non-structural, that would be sugar and starch, in the diet of the ruminant in order for the rumen to function properly. And it's all a matter of balance, as it is in so many aspects of life. And so we should understand by now that we could consider food that comes from ruminants to be true health food. Yes? Okay, we've got beef, which I know is the state meal. We've got goat. We've got venison, we've got lamb, we could add to the list, okay? I'm also promoting these as different kinds of fermented plant products. These ruminants perform essential ecological functions. Nobody has yet proposed an adequate substitute as they talk about alternatives to ruminant or animal agriculture. They, as I've already mentioned, they convert carbohydrates into fat. They convert this low-quality protein and, in fact, non-protein nitrogen into high-quality animal protein. They reduce the unstable polyunsaturated fatty acids to monounsaturated and saturated. 70 to 80% of the linoleic acid that they might eat, and again, that's a small amount, but 70 to 80% is that going to be biohydrogenated. So the flesh of ruminants is always going to be less influenced by their diet than the flesh of simple-stomached animals. They produce vitamins, they increase bioavailability of essential minerals, they degrade anti-quality plant components, they maintain the health and vitality of grasslands, which are our largest natural terrestrial biome. They recycle nutrients, build soil health, they provide these services, as I mentioned. They're a significant source of new wealth generation around the world. All these are essential. I don't hear the advocates for the opposing side offering a viable alternative. And most important, as has been mentioned, this idea, I should have mentioned, I've posted a PDF of these slides on my social media accounts. You can go download that, and I'm happy to share. So we didn't evolve to eat meat, we evolved because we ate meat, as was just very well explained. I love the way that all the talks are kind of adding on to each other, not repeating each other. And again, these livestock of all kinds, not just ruminants, but they're a key global commodity. The numbers are staggering. $1.4 trillion of value worldwide. What's your alternative? As asset value. You know, the industries, the support for livelihoods, the way that livestock actually mitigate risk for people living around the world. So there's many, many aspects that people don't frequently consider when they confidently talk about alternatives to livestock agriculture. One of the myths is that livestock agriculture is competitive with humans. If we just fed the feed that the livestock eat to humans, we could feed more humans. Anybody heard that? Male bovine fecal matter. 14% of the 6 billion tons, that's metric tons, of dry matter every year that's consumed by the world's livestock, 86% of that is not edible by humans. So we're taking that resource, and I love the term upcycling it. Okay? And frankly, even if you can eat it, maybe we should rethink that whole superfood thing, hey? People say that we should be on plant-based diets. Brothers and sisters, humanity is already on a plant-based diet. Is that a good thing? Majority of calories around the world, and even in the developed world, and I guess I should stop using those terms because they represent a world that existed 30 years ago. But majority of the calories in humanity's diet are coming from plant products. If we look at protein, worldwide, majority of protein in humanity's diet is coming from plant sources. Is plant source protein and animal source protein equivalent in the human diet? No, it is not. Animal source proteins are on average about 1.4 times the biological value of plant sources. And then there's some other aspects about that. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So if we look at the global protein supply, ruminant animals are providing 10% out of dairy. Then we've got, cattle and buffalo is 4 and sheep and goats are 1. So 15% of humanity's protein supply is coming from ruminant animals. But look at the other major sources of protein in humanity's diet. Cereals, really? Is that a good thing? And at some point we can start talking about meat and meat quality and differences, but not in our dietary guidelines. No. Those are all treated as if meat is a single commodity, all uniform. And I would like to differ just a little bit. And I'm not saying bad, but I'm saying different, okay? Sometimes the snark overwhelms me. So we can't... The simple truth is that we can't feed today's world without ruminant animal agriculture. Full stop. Let alone hoping to achieve the world of 2050's goals. Full stop. But in order to do that, we have to get better. We have to improve the productivity and efficiency of ruminant animal agriculture here and around the world. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity. It's certainly achievable. So here's the challenge that's ahead. You may have seen figures like this talking about in 32 years we'll have 2 billion more human beings in the world. That's going to mean that we have to double food production by that 2050 time frame. FAO predicts a 66% increase in demand for animal protein in 32 years. Here's the kicker. They say it's got to come from virtually the same land area as today, and that ain't going to be the case. And we can talk about that going forward. But these are the goals. What's your alternative? And understand that, as has been mentioned, the thing that we're seeing in the affluent North America is a reality around the world. And it's happening at a frightening rate. So I was blessed to be able to go to Brazil and see what they were doing, wonderful things with soil health and integrated systems. In 75, Brazil had the world's 9th largest population of underweight men. By 2014, it was ranked 3rd globally for obese men. 1 child in 3 is overweight. 1 in 4 women are obese. And that's happened in 40-some years. Worldwide. So again, how are we going to feed these people? What would be a species-appropriate diet to apply? So here's our limited resource, right? This is what we got. And if you start parceling that out, obviously the majority is going to be water. And there's issues to do with aquaculture and harvesting marine resources, not qualified to go there. So basically only 4% of the Earth's entire surface is suitable for cultivation. You know, growing that healthy kale. Okay? But meanwhile, we've got 14% of the Earth's surface that's rangeland. That's land that cannot, should not be put into cultivation. That's interesting. We also got 10% that's in forest. We can run animals in forest in a managed way and produce food from almost a quarter of the Earth's surface. And believe me, it's an underutilized resource. So here we go. Let's look at this, shall we? In the center, as it should be, we have ruminants, cattle, sheep, goats, deer. We have the land resource, and we got humans down here. Okay, what can we do with the land? Well, we can grow forage crops. That would be grass, for example, that we cut and haul somewhere else. Or we could let the animals graze on pasture or rangeland. And note that none of those are producing food for human beings' use. We could grow grain, oilseed, fruit, vegetable crops. How much of the Earth's surface can grow those? 4%. Not a lot. Okay. And then you can argue about how much of that we should be eating anyway. Thank you. So, but the thing to remember is that from that production, not all of it's edible. We're going to have waste products, stalks, leaves, processing waste. By the way, the food waste losses are greatest among fresh vegetables and fruit, from production through retail, through home consumption. It's the highest amount of loss. And we really need to get a handle on food loss. That's a key part of reaching the sustainability goal, but we don't talk about it all that much. So, okay, some amount of that could be fed to ruminants. Some of it could go to humans. Okay. So but as was just mentioned, what's a good source of all our essential nutrients? Ruminant animal products, for example. From that, we're also going to have waste products that go back to the land. The ruminant animal agriculture right now is real good at this loop. We've really broken this loop. from humans. But here's a cool thing. The grazing animal removes far less nutrients from the land than do our commodity crops. So they're far less depleting of that resource. Oh, please. Please? Really, please? Excellent. Okay, so cattle actually increase the human edible protein supply. You feed them 0.6 of a kilogram of human edible protein, and they produce a kilogram. And it's higher quality, it's upcycled. If somebody talks to you about how much agricultural land is dedicated to livestock, beware. Make sure that they're not calling all of the farmland as if it could produce crops. In the United States, which is richly blessed with cropland, only 43% of the farmland is cropland. The rest of it is rangeland, woodland, other use. Okay? So watch them. They play that game frequently. So let's look worldwide at the crops that are currently being grown on the arable land, that little 4% that we're losing, by the way, due to development and degradation. But for the time being, we'll look at this. Over 3/4 of it is already producing food and fiber for human use. Less than 1/4 is producing food for animals, all kinds of animals. So if we got rid of all the animals, we would gain less than 1/4 of the acreage. Is that going to do it? I don't think so. Because remember, it's not a one-to-one swap for protein, for example. You're going to have to increase the productivity to match the deficit. Okay. When our soils are gone, we too must go unless we find some way to feed on raw rock. That'll probably come right after the cell-cultured protein. So if we look at all the feed that goes to all the livestock around the world, ruminants actually only take 1/5 of that feed because they're ruminants. You look at poultry or swine, and you've got 65% over 70% of the feed that's being fed. So there's your grain use, not the ruminants. So why do they blame the ruminants? And even in the United States, your typical grain-fed steer on a life cycle basis is going to get less than 10% of its feed as grain. Now, to me, that sounds like a really good deal because I think we're eating too much grain. Right? The problem is not the grain-fed cattle, the problem's the grain-fed people. And if people start talking to you about rates of efficiency and whatever, let's just remember, please, that if we could separate out the grain that's fed and the beef that's produced from the grain that's fed to the beef, its conversion rate is similar to chicken and actually a little better than pork. But the rest of their diet has to come from this grazing land because they're ruminants. But we can't use forage, can we? Thank you. We need to stop the us versus them in the conversation. I hear so many confident assertions that are poorly documented. And then that becomes our new conventional wisdom. And I want what people have already learned here and will learn for the rest of this conference. I want that information to reach my agricultural tribe. Because I guarantee you the same challenges are there. I guarantee you they have the same misunderstandings about human health and the relationship to diet. Even though they're a little suspicious, but they still are operating. I can't tell you the miserable snacks that are served at our... No, never mind. Consumers and producers alike care about animal welfare, environmental stewardship, food safety, nutrition, taste. Can we please start talking with each other? Can we please start listening to each other? And the U.S. beef industry is not what people imagine. I mean, there's over 750,000 beef farms and ranches in the United States. Average size is 40 head. 91% of those are family-owned or individually operated. That's the beef industry. Yeah, we have 26 plus thousand feedlots and we're going through a transition, but again, the average size, 93% of them are under 1,000 head capacity. So what's people's images of them? Does it line up with the facts? It's always good to check it out. And the reality is that if you look at the beef systems in the United States, for the first, 8 to 16 months, it's exactly the same. They're going to be on pasture. Probably poorer quality pasture when it's the cow-calf, certainly out in the West. Mama cow needs very low quality food to get her job done. Okay? So she delivers a calf, then suckles that calf. The calf slowly begins to eat more and more dry feed. Oh, by the way, when the calf is born, it doesn't have a functional rumen. It has to develop that capacity over time. And then animals get weaned and they move to higher quality pasture. They could go into a backgrounding operation where they would get a higher energy ration. And then at some point, they either continue to slaughter as wholly grass-fed or they go into a feedlot where they receive a ration that, as we just showed, has grain in it, but it's not entirely grain. Again, it's going to take different amounts of time to achieve the different goals. They're going to be different sizes. There's lots of things to look at here. I hear very confident assertions that make me very nervous. I think that's how we got in the trouble that we're in. I'm not going to spend any time or much talking about meat quality and safety today. I've done that a lot in some previous talks, and I'm happy to answer the questions. I have the slides at the very end, but I know time is pressing. So I have a real dark secret to confess to you all, and that is that I agree with Dean Ornish. In this case. When he says what's good for you is good for our planet, I absolutely agree, because butter, meat, and cheese belong in a healthy diet. Those are the products of forage agriculture. And forage agriculture is far better than commodity agriculture for our planet, though I'm certain Dean Ornish doesn't know that. Why should he? Sustainability has become this really feel-good word that's completely meaningless to most people. They don't understand what they're talking about. I refer to it sometimes as sustain-a-babble. All you have to do is mutter the incantation over your product and it's all good. Here's your hint to know whether we're having an honest conversation about true sustainability. Does it contain components of societal nature? Does it contain components of an economic nature as well as an ecological nature? Okay? So here, what's the burden of chronic disease? Yeah. Bankrupting. Well, that will be down here. Up here, what's it like on diminished lives of family members? Lessened ability to work, early death in parents and what that does to children. You want to continue the list? We could make one heck of a list of burden of chronic disease. 60% of adult Americans today have one or more chronic illnesses. Something like 12, it might be 15%, have 5 or more. Are we counting that when people say, well, the commodity agriculture would be more sustainable? Yeah, but eating it is bankrupting us. And here's the bankruptcy, right? $1 billion a day just for overt diabetes care. Mother Nature never farms without livestock. Once upon a time, we had integrated systems. In some parts of the world, they're really good at that. We've gone down the route of specialization. There are people doing lots of very interesting work to pull that back, and we could talk about that. Okay, so you hear very confident statements about how livestock produce more greenhouse gas emissions than all of transportation, right? They're not even trying. In 2010, the UN admitted they made a mistake in their livestock's long shadow statement where they came up with 18%. And they compared that to transportation. But what they were looking at was a full life cycle assessment for the livestock, and they were comparing it to tailpipe emissions only for transport. Okay? So they admitted their mistake. They did a recalculation, republished it. They now say it's 14%, 14.5%. USDA in the previous administration estimated greenhouse gas emissions in the United States for all of agriculture at 9% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. 9%. livestock agriculture in the U.S. is 4%, beef is 2%, transport is 28%. I love this picture just to make the point. That's water vapor. It's a greenhouse gas. Okay, but in addition to that, please stop talking about cow farts. I know, I love a good fart joke as much as anybody else. But the point is, this is enteric produced. It's coming out in burps, right? It's not coming out, never mind. Okay. Some things only matter to me. Move along, Pete. So what I did was I said, okay, let me figure out what the greenhouse gas CO2 equivalents are from various amounts of trimmed raw beef if I was eating that per day on an annual basis, right? So this is 2 pounds per day, raw trimmed boneless beef. That would be annually 10.8 thousand kilograms. Ooh, that's a big number. It's got a comma in it. That must be bad. How about it? Well, if we look, that's equivalent to driving a car getting average gas mileage 16,700 miles a year. That's eating 2 pounds of raw beef a day for a year is the equivalent of annually, okay, get it? Okay. Or how about airline travel, 33,000 miles? Oh, by the way, these are tailpipe emissions too. This is the same biased calculation where this is everything to do with that beef production. What the are we talking about? If animal agriculture was eliminated in the U.S., we'd reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. by 2.6% and 0.36% globally, but at the cost of unbalancing our food ecosystem and creation of essential dietary nutrients deficiencies. Oh, that sounds like a great deal. And you can look at what's happened in the trends of, again, enteric methane generation. U.S. has been flat. Developing countries has been trending downward. It's the developing countries that are increasing. Something like 1.5 billion human beings would love to not be vegetarians if they could afford not to be. Or put it a little snarkier way, both professions wear white coats, which produces more greenhouse gases. Well, I just told you, all of U.S. animal agriculture is 4%, beef is 2%, U.S. healthcare system is 10%. I wonder why they don't talk about that. So we could talk about water use. If you see thousands of gallons per pound of beef, it's more MBFM being thrown your way. The average figure for the United States is probably more like 440 gallons per pound of lean trimmed beef. But if you're looking at the East Coast, where they don't have to use any irrigation to produce feed, it's like 75 gallons. Just to kind of set this some kind of perspective, an acre inch of water is over 27,000 gallons. An acre is 209 feet by 209 feet, roughly. Okay? Your average precipitation here in Houston is 49.7. Y'all got a lot of concrete around here. You got a lot of roof surfaces here. What happens to that water? Somehow that's okay. But 440 gallons of water to produce a pound of beef, that's not okay. I'm sorry, I think that's a good deal. They're only now beginning to say, look, it is completely unfair to compare on a pound-for-pound basis environmental footprint of meat against plant products. You need to calculate what the nutrients are, not the mass is. And when you do that, actually what you find is meat ends up being in the range of most foods of vegetable origin. That's awkward. So here's another test. Let's compare animal versus plant source food, shall we? Because we got to eat something. We can't eat raw rock, right? So if I could design for you 2 diets for a human being, somebody you didn't like very much, and the one was completely formed out of animal source foods and the other was completely the one that you liked, the people, it would completely formed out of animal source foods. If you could make them equal amounts of calories, would they have the same metabolic effect on the humans that you're feeding? No, they would not. How about protein and minerals? If you could, again, design 2 different diets, equal amounts, would they have the same effect metabolically? No, they would not. Is the vitamin requirement independent of the food sources that make up the diet? No, it is not. So here's another awkward question. Are the plants actually required? Why do we think plants are required? What if it is true, and I'm wildly speculating here, what if it's possible and true that there is no essential nutrient in the human diet that can't be sourced from animal source foods? Brian, you and I had our dose for the day, didn't we? The greatest wealth is health. As I said, we need to put more value on our health and the health of our loved ones. You are worth it. And there's really great hope. We're hearing it. Right? When you are improving your health, you are improving the world. And we can have healthy soil, which we must have, and we can have healthy people thanks to ruminant animals. Now, I've been doing all kinds of stuff to try to increase awareness about ruminant animals and their role in our environment, in our food system, in our society, and the role of ruminant animal products in human health and nutrition. I refer to people who are coming along on this journey as the Ruminati, and we're accepting applications. Part of what I'm proposing to my agricultural brethren is, just as we needed a green revolution to avoid famine and starvation in the 60s and 70s, we need a ruminant revolution to enable prosperity for our brothers and sisters around the world by 2050. So, some of the things I've said may not agree with your understanding. I could be wrong. That's a useful phrase to keep in mind. A phrase not often used in a man's own home. Oh, come on. But we're dealing with people who are coming at us from belief systems and other narratives, not necessarily from fact. And so I like the quote, it's a challenge to me. If an honest man is wrong after demonstrating he is wrong, he either stops being wrong or he stops being honest. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming and supporting this effort.